New to Formula One?
Or just as obsessed as we are?
Welcome back to another episode of Formation Lab,
where we teach you all the dirty details that you need to know to be the best Formula One fan that you can be.
You are live with the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Hello, everyone. And for our final episode of Formation Lab for 2021, we have gathered all of our listener questions from the year to answer.
Okay, Katie, let's hear our first question.
Hey, Katie. Hey, Megan. Thanks for having me on. This is Tina. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I was wondering, what the purpose of the Formation Lap is and who the attended audience is for the Formation Lap. Is that for the typical viewers, new viewers? Thanks for having me on. Love the podcast. Keep killing it, girls.
Well, Tina, I am so happy you asked that question because the purpose of the Formation Lab episodes are to educate new fans and us fanatics on the different basics of Formula One. So each week this past season, Megan and I have taken a topic and really dove into it and talked about it for about 20 minutes just to give more insight into the world of Formula One. Next season, we'll have a couple more formation laps. We're going to revisit some of the topics as things have changed. And we're just going to keep chugging away and trying to build this community and welcome new fans in and give them a way to learn more about the sport.
It's like a crash course and a refresher all in one. Take it how you need it.
You can skip some episodes if you'd like. You can listen to all of them. It's really what you need to be a better fan of Formula One.
In terms of the formation lap before a race, it's the single lap that the cars take once around the track before lights out and away we go. It allows the cars to warm up their tires and their brakes. It's important for grip because cold or cool levels can cause a lot of wheel spin, and that's what you don't want when you're trying to get off the line as quick as possible. We often see cars weaving back and forth as they get closer and closer to the starting grid, and that's to get that final heat into their wheels and into their brakes. But also we see the front row cars slowing down to bunch up the group because they don't want to be left sitting on the grid for an extended period of time, allowing their tires and brakes to get cold. You're not allowed to overtake and have to be in your grid order. And it's that final double check to make sure that the cars are running, give it a final check. A good example of this is in Bahrain. We saw Sergio Perez's Red Bull stop on track. So he was able to get it eventually restarted, but the grid had to complete an additional lap so that the marshals could make sure that the incident was taken care of and the race could start without issue.
And normally the formation lap means Megan and I's last minute run around the house. We grab our cup of tea, we grab our water, we grab our breakfast, we're grabbing our laptops.
Or we're yelling at our parents come on, the race is starting.
Sit down, everybody. Yeah, it's that, okay, we've got 60 seconds to the start of the race moment.
Okay, let's go into our second question.
Hey Katie, Arnav here, and huge fan of the podcast. I just wanted to know, as I listen to them as someone who's not very familiar with F1 overall, how are points scored when drivers are competing in different races? Thanks.
Well, okay, thanks, Arnav. Guess this one is only for Katie to answer. Take it away.
Okay, I will cover the points. So, the points are awarded to the top 10 drivers of every race. P1 earns 25 points, P2 earns 18 points, and it trickles down all the way to P10 earning 1 point. If you are in between 11th and 20th place, there are no points for you that weekend. Additionally, the driver with the fastest lap, only if they're in the top 10, is awarded an additional point. The only caveats to this system come from the sprint race structure, which is the short race on Saturday to determine the grid. On Sunday, we had 3 of them this year. We'll have 6 of them next year. And the top 3 drivers are awarded some extra points. If you land in P1, you get 3, P2, 2, and P3, you get 1 point.
I'll be interested to see if those sprint races are more points next year.
Yeah,
kind of hoping they are.
There's been some debate around that to make them a little bit more worth the team and the drivers' wild. So we'll have to see. Changes probably to come.
Excited. Stay tuned for another Formation Lab episode.
Okay, let's hit our third question.
Hi, Katie and Megan. I'm new to Formula One, and my question is, how does one become an F1 driver?
Okay, so many of them take a very similar path to Formula One, and it starts when they're about 5, 6, 7 years old and they get into karting.
Wasn't Max Verstappen like 3?
Yeah, Max was very young when he got in. And that's because most of the drivers' fathers have been in racing at some point, some of them in Formula One, some of them in rallying. It really just depends. So most of the time it is a family thing, but they get introduced to karting. It's single seating. If you're good at karting, you move forward. You're not already in a formula car at the age of 12, but you continue to move through the karting competitions until you can make an early move to the European realm of competition.
I think it's kind of interesting that you can be really good at karting and never get into a formula car, but you have to be successful in karting to move forward. So just because you're good at it doesn't mean you'll ever be in a formula car, but if you aren't good at karting, there's no chance you'll ever move to a Formula One car.
Exactly. They are asked when did their racing career start. They all refer back to their karting days.
Which is crazy because karting is not a thing in the United States. I don't know anybody ever. I didn't even know about karting until I got into Formula One. And I'm really sad I didn't get into it. I think it would be cool.
I would highly suggest doing a quick Google search of karting if you're unfamiliar with it. It'll pop up. You can search karting into Formula One, and you'll kind of get a picture of what the cars look like and what the tracks look like, but they're young.
2 other places that you could go to learn about karting is you can watch the Michael Schumacher documentary, because in that you see Schumacher's time in karting, because his dad owned, or his parents owned, a karting track. And then the other place is Lewis Hamilton did an interview with David Letterman, and it's on Netflix, and he talks about his time in karting, because as a black child with a black father in British karting, they were the only people of color at the tracks. And so they really struggled, but Lewis found extreme success in it.
As you can see.
Obviously, look at him now. And then the other thing you can also do is you can look at Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. They both have their own karting teams. Lando's is new, but both of them promote their karting. They're not the only ones, but both of them are very active about their karting on social media.
After karting, they make their way to the junior formulas, which is Formula 3 and Formula 2. Most of the time, if you are one that is very talented, it will be a quick move from Formula 3 to Formula 2, and then shortly thereafter, you will move up to Formula 1 if there are seats open and if you show that promise.
Because there's only 20 drivers on the grid every year. And like Lewis Hamilton has been in it forever. Vettel's been in it forever. Alonso was in it, left, is back. Raikkonen's been in forever. So it's all about timing, because you could be an amazing F2 driver and never get into Formula One because there's just not a place for you.
And then after your success in Formula 2, you most likely are the Formula 2 world champion or the second place driver. You are then kind of courted and invited into Formula 1 by one of the teams.
You could potentially have start as like a reserve driver. So we have Oscar Piastri is going to be the Alpine reserve driver. Or you could have been brought up through a junior team. So Red Bull has their own junior drivers team. So does Ferrari, which is how they were able to pick up some young talent. Think Alex Albon, think Pierre Gasly, think Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen,
Sebastian Vettel, all of them. Yeah. All of them started in the junior driving programs. The most important thing that you need is money. It is a very expensive sport to get into. If you do further digging on karting, you will see in interviews that a lot of their parents worked multiple jobs if they were not fortunate enough to come from money or be a Formula One star. So that's the most important thing. And a lot of that goes with sponsors. And then once you have a couple sponsors, then you find the team. So we just saw this with Guan Yu Zhao, who was essentially courted by Alfa Romeo for that Chinese market of not only sponsorships but also fans.
You also see how much money plays a role in not just being able to have access to the sport, having a cart to show up to races and participate in, having the money for the fuel, having the money for the new tires, but also being able to afford the move to Europe, being able to afford to live in a foreign country, being able to show up in a suit. And then often having a big name sponsor behind you is how, if it's not just like the Chinese market, you have a name sponsor already that is paying for you so that the teams don't have to pay for you. Okay, should we move into our next question?
Yes.
Hi, girls. My question for you is, when I'm not watching with you, how do I watch the races?
Okay. Big shout out to our father, Roger. Just this morning, I taught him how to subscribe to our podcast.
Which he has actively been recommending to people, but he himself was not subscribed. Love you.
We love you so much. We are so thankful for your support. But when you're not watching with us, Dad, we'll give you our login to our Formula One TV account. That's where I highly suggest watching. It's about $80 for the whole year. Every once in a while, they'll be running a sale, so you might hop in on that. It brings it down to about $70. But it's really worth it if you're trying to get into Formula One, because not only are you allowed to watch practice, qualifying, and the race live, but you're also able to access their video history, thank you, Megan, that has all the races ever that you could ever want to watch. It has all the interviews ever that you could ever want to watch. And most importantly, they put out race recaps, they put out practice recaps, and they put out qualifying recaps, which are all the highlights. So let's say you're unable to watch practice one day and you don't have enough time to watch that hour long, you can watch one of the highlights and recaps of the practice, which are about 10 minutes. So highly suggest F1 TV if you are willing to subscribe to it. If not, you're also able to watch on ESPN and YouTube TV.
I think there will be more platforms for us Americans to watch it and access the sport as it becomes more popular in the United States. Think back to Austin Weekend, or if you weren't watching during Austin Weekend, it was not only broadcasted on air, it was on ABC, but you could also see the driver press conferences on TV. It was just easier to access content. But as Austin was only one weekend and there's going to be 22 others next year, I co-sign what Katie said. F1 TV is worth every penny, especially all the additional content that you can watch.
Okay, let's hop into our next question.
Hey, Katie and Megan, this is Rachel. I had a question for you guys. Are we missing out if we don't watch practice or qualifiers? Just wondering. Thanks.
I think the most important thing to watch in a weekend is the race. And if you're a new fan, I highly recommend starting with the race. Once you get comfortable, maybe waking up that early, or once you're ready to take a further step into it, add on qualifiers. And then once you are, again, comfortable with watching qualifiers and the race, watch practice. And like I just mentioned in the previous question, if you have F1 TV, if you don't want to sit and watch the whole practice, or if you don't want to sit and watch the whole qualifying, watch the 10-minute highlights.
I'll be honest, both of us didn't really watch practice up until this year, because it was a commitment. It's a time commitment. I would watch qualifying and the race. But now that I have dove into it and I understand and I want to know more and I want to see more and I want to understand why the cars are performing the way they're performing during qualifying and on the Grand Prix weekends, I started watching practice. And I've come to really like practice. So
practice, there's a little bit more commentating on the weekend itself, the track itself, what setups the drivers and the teams are using. So it gives you a nice foundation for going into the weekend, especially as we've seen in the last 2 weekends with new tracks. For people like Megan and I who are, the hardcore fans, we don't know anything about these tracks. And so the first time we really get to see anything is practice.
It's also kind of fun. As I've been watching practices, it's cool to watch them like practice race starts, practice pit stops, trying to figure out when to brake, when to get on the power and going into a turn and coming out of a turn. I don't know. I would say if it's overwhelming, a lot of commentating on practice when you're first starting out, start with qualifying and the race and then work your way in. Next year, we're going to have the 6 sprint weekends. So those could be kind of cool weekends to test out watching more, because you would get qualifying on Friday, the sprint race on Saturday, and then the Grand Prix on Sunday.
Let's hear our next question.
Hey, Katie and Megan, it's Gavin. One question for you guys. How long is a driver's contract? And how much do they make? Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of the podcast.
How long? Depends. How much? Shit tons. That's the short answer.
It really just depends on how successful and how great of a driver they are.
And their future potential.
Exactly. So one of the best and longest contracts we've ever seen was Charles Leclerc. He was a rookie coming in to Formula One. He raced for Sauber. And then he got promoted to Ferrari, where he signed a 5-year contract, which is like one of the longest contracts ever heard of for someone, A, that young, and B, just
at Ferrari.
And
then you have like Lewis Hamilton, who's making shit tons of money. I don't have an actual number. I think the last statistic or fact I saw was that it's around $45 million a year. Again, that's a private contract. I will say that Formula One, for us Americans, is pretty quiet about how much they make, as opposed to, baseball players and hockey players. We know what their contracts are worth. It's like $10 million over 6 years. We don't really know those kind of in and out details in Formula One for the most part. But back to what I was saying, Lewis Hamilton is only on a 1-year contract. We know that he was on a 1-year contract last year. He's on a 1-year contract this year. I would bet big money that he's going to be on a 1-year contract with Mercedes next year. But they also make money outside of those contracts. So we have their sponsorships. We see their deals with outside companies. Some of them are only paid by their sponsor and not paid by the team at all, which is how we saw Sergio Perez even come into the sport. He was paid as a driver by his sponsor, Telmex. So the team Force India never paid him originally. Let's get into our next question.
Hey, Katie and Megan, this is Monica. I had one question for you guys. Could you guys clarify what the blue flags mean and why people keep making jokes about them on Twitter? I love you guys and I love the podcast.
Okay, Katie, I'm going to take what they are and you can talk about Twitter.
Okay.
So blue flags are a flag that is waved or shown on the light pad that tells the slower driver that a faster car is coming around to overtake them. So that would be like if you are getting lapped. So perfect example, Lewis Hamilton, P1, he's made it all the way around the track, and now he's catching up to who's in P20, Nikita Mazepin, and is going to overtake him because he's faster and on a completely different lap.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, his car is just going faster and he needs to get around Nikita.
It seems a little counterintuitive. They're racing. The person should be allowed to race against them. But the goal of a blue flag is to avoid any accidents from a faster car that is just lapping people quicker than the back of the grid is even driving at. The slower driver at the earliest opportunity, at the safest opportunity, has to move out of the faster driver's way. 3 blue flags are waved before the driver is given a penalty. So if they're shown it once, they're shown it twice, they're shown it 3 times. If they ignore it a 4th time, a penalty is incurred.
And the reason why it's been so popular on Twitter is because of Nikita Mazepin himself. We know that there's a lot of talk about him on Twitter. If you're a part of the F1 Twitter world, there's an account dedicated just to, did Mazepin spin? And if he does, they tweet yes. And if he doesn't, they tweet no.
Often yes.
Most of the time it's yes. So in Portugal, the 3rd race of the year, Mazepin got his first F1 penalty point because he ignored the blue flags. And essentially he blocked Red Bull Sergio Perez from getting through. He was shown 5 blue flags And eventually Perez called him a fucking idiot. Mazepin was given a 5-second time penalty. And honestly, like I said, it's the third race of the season. Since then, we have continued to have issues about blue flags. So it's really just been a point of conversation on Twitter every single time it happens, because you would have thought that we would have learned by now that when you see a blue flag, it means to get out of the fucking way.
Honestly, I highly recommend Google Nikita Mazepin blue flags, because there's a ton of articles out there that talk about his response to this whole blue flag incident. He was like, it's going to take me a while to understand blue flags. And I was like, what do you mean? You move out of the way. Yeah. You see the blue, you move out of the way.
If you're seeing the yellow flags, then you can be seeing the blue flags.
Okay, let's get into our last question.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I'm PJ. I just wanted to ask, what is Formula E?
Okay, so Formula E is a single-seater motorsport championship for electric cars. There are 12 teams. There are 2 drivers for each team for a total of 24. It had its first season in 2014.
And in the 2021 season, we saw the first world championship, as it was finally elected to be able to win a world championship by the FIA. Nick de Vries won for the Mercedes EQ Team Formula E, which he was partnered with Stoffel van Dorn, who used to race in Formula 1.
Correct.
And the coolest thing about...
Literally the coolest thing.
The coolest thing is that Mrs. Wolff, Miss Toto Wolff, Susie, used to be the team principal this past year of the Venturi Racing, and now just moved to the CEO. So let's just say they are the greatest power couple to, I don't know, ever exist.
Formula 1, for sure. Love them. Love their son, Little Wolf. He's amazing. The Totos. I mean, the Wolves.
The Wolves, yeah. They are phenomenal, and I'm excited to see Formula E continue to get more and more popular. Right now, again, there's only about 15 races or so, but it's really cool. There's a lot of differences in the sport, but there's also a lot of similarities to Formula 1 itself. I would highly suggest watching at least one race.
I plan to follow it next year. Like, I plan to actively engage in Formula E next year, because I support the whole point of it, to be sustainable, to be working towards allowing for motorsport to continue, but in a way that is eco-friendly and is environmentally safe and is just overall a little bit more conscious of the use of technology and power.
And something else that we are committed to getting involved in and following is the W Series, which is the women's version of a formula racing within the world of motorsport.
Absolutely. So it's all female. It's single-seater, just like Formula 1. It's the upper echelons of motorsport. It is geared towards allowing women and promoting women racers. And as 2 females in the Formula 1 motorsporting world, that's something that we actively support and are going to actively follow next year. So stay tuned for our Formula E and our W Series updates. I kind of want to make them a part of the episodes in some capacity. So yeah, stay tuned for that next year.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone who submitted questions. If you have more questions, we are always happy to answer them and continue the conversation about Formula 1. We are so thankful for every single one of you who have listened along the way this season. We cannot believe we've finished season 1 and we are just a couple months out from starting season 2. So thank you so much. I will never be able to say that enough, and I guess we'll see you next season.
See you next... Well, wait, not next season yet. We still are going to come out with the 2021 full season recap. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, thank you. I cannot say it enough. This has been a passion project for us, and we're so thankful for everybody who has supported it, championed it, asked questions, engaged with it, subscribed, and we can't wait for next season. So, hey, in the off season, stay dirty. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.